Hello everyone, my name is Bakul Soman. I want to welcome you back to my channel. We're here again today with a brand new video. I want to thank all of you who watched my first video, who liked, who subscribed, who commented. You have no idea how much your encouragement and your support mean to me. And I hope that me getting started on my passion project has inspired at least some of you to get started on something you have always wanted to do. And if it has, please let me know in the comments section below. I would love to share in your success, and I'm sure that it's going to inspire a lot of others to move forward as well. Last week, I said that today's video was going to be about the 6 pillars of effective communication. Well, we are going to be talking about communication, but the pillars analogy just was not working. Pillars convey a sense of being static and stationary. And communication is anything but that. In fact, it is as far away from that spectrum as one can imagine. Communication is this ever-evolving, fluid, dynamic thing that is constantly changing. So we're going to do away with the pillars for now. When you think of communication, what's the first thing that comes to mind? If you said something like speaking, speech, talking, you're not wrong, but that's not the whole story. In fact, if you are only relying on speaking to become a more effective communicator, you are bound to fail. Speaking is just one small part of a much bigger interconnected system. And it is impossible to fit all the bits and pieces of this system into one video, so this is going to be a multi-part series. In today's video, we are going to define effective communication. We're going to recognize the cost of miscommunication, and we are going to talk about one component of this complex system. Okay, so let's talk about definitions. What do I mean when I talk about successful communication? Here is a definition I came across that I really liked. I found this in the Peace Corps Cultural Workbook. I came across it many years ago when I was conducting a workshop at a university around cross-cultural communication. It says, communication is successful when what one person means when he or she says something is perfectly aligned with what the other person thinks it means. Okay, I want you to take a moment and think about that. It's very simple, but very profound at the same time. This is a good definition, but I still feel it leaves out some important aspects. So I'm going to adapt it a little bit. So here is my revised definition. Communication is successful when what one person means when he or she says or does something is perfectly aligned with what the other person thinks it means, and it serves the purpose of building or furthering trust and strengthening the relationship. So what is the flip side of this? The flip side of this is that the meaning that is intended by the person who does or says something is not the same as the meaning that is inferred, that is taken away by the other person, the person who's listening. There's a misalignment, there's a mismatch, and that is a failure to communicate. Or it could be that the meaning is aligned, but it doesn't further the relationship. It doesn't build trust. Let me give you an example. Let's say you're very angry at someone and you say something with the intention of lashing out at them. Your intention is to hurt them, and they do get hurt. So the purpose is aligned. The meaning is correctly conveyed. But does that build trust or strengthen the relationship? No. So in my opinion, that is an example of ineffective communication, miscommunication. What is the cost of miscommunication? It is very significant. There's a lot of time wasted because you're wasting time going back and forth trying to clarify things. There is a lot of energy wasted, whether it's physical energy or emotional energy. Trust is eroded. Relationships are damaged. So the cost of miscommunication is very high, which is why we need to work really hard to get it right as often as we can. Okay, so we said we're not going to use pillars as an analogy. Is there a better way to think about this complex communication system? I thought about this for a long time, and I believe that a system of interconnected gears is probably a better way to think about it. In a system of interconnected gears, each gear moves, and anytime any of the gear moves, it changes or it causes the other gears to move as well. Communication is like that. It has multiple components, and the components are constantly interacting with each other. Each exchange is guiding and changing what happens next. It sounds pretty complex, right? It is. And that's probably why we get it wrong so often. Some of this information is intuitive, some of it less so. Regardless, it is really important to lay out all the different parts so that if something goes wrong, we can really go back and analyze and figure out which of those different aspects did we go wrong in. Where did things go awry?
Today we will focus on one component of that multi-gear system, and that component is speaking.
Speaking is the most visible part of communication, and it is the most concrete in some sense. So let's get started with that. There are multiple facets, multiple aspects that we need to consider when we're trying to become a more effective speaker. Number one, rate of speech. This is one of the most common ways in which you can reduce your efficiency as a speaker. A lot of times people speak too fast. And it is very difficult for the listener to process and understand what you're saying if you're speaking too fast. So if you want to be understood, reduce your rate of speech. Now, just naturally, there are situations in which you're going to speak a little faster, right? If there's something really exciting, something you're really passionate about, your rate of speech is going to pick up a little bit naturally. And if you're trying to convey something really serious, something sad, something grave, your rate of speech is going to be reduced naturally. So there are these natural variations, but if the content of what you're trying to say is really important, then you need to watch your rate of speech. You need to slow down. Here are some guidelines for words per minute. Less than 110 words per minute is considered slow. Conversational speech is around 120 to 150 words per minute. Fast speech is greater than 160 words per minute. Radio hosts and podcasters tend to talk at about 150 to 160 words per minute. And auctioneers and commentators are in a league of their own, 250 to 400 words per minute. Where do you land on the spectrum? If you're curious, here's something you can do. Open up a Word doc or a Google Doc and put in about 4 to 5 paragraphs of text. You can do a word count. There's I think under tools, there's a feature where you could just click word count and it'll tell you how many words are in that passage. Read it through a few times until you're comfortable with it, and then read it at a conversational pace. While you're reading it, make sure you use a stopwatch so you know how long it took you, okay? Then you need to convert that time, which is going to be in minutes and seconds, into a decimal. You can go to a website called calculatorsoup.com. I've left the complete link down in the description below. It has a lot of different calculators, and there's one that converts time into a decimal. So do that conversion, and then you're simply going to divide the total number of words that you read and the amount of time it took you in decimals, and you're going to get your words per minute. Okay, moving on to point number 2, precise. Okay, what does it mean to be precise? Being precise means using specific vocabulary and sentence structure to clearly convey your thought, unambiguously. Your content comes across crystal clear. Here are 2 sentences. Both of them say the same thing, but in a very different way. Let's take a look. The meeting will be held on Monday at 3 p.m. in the conference room on the 5th floor. The meeting will be sometime next week, probably in one of the conference rooms. One of these is very clear and unambiguous, one not so much. So you should always be aiming for speaking with precision. Point number 3, concise. What's the difference between precise and concise? Precise has to do with accuracy. Concise has to do with length. How efficiently you convey what you're trying to say using the fewest amount of words. Here is an example. There are 2 sentences that mean the same thing, but say it very differently. The deadline for the project is scheduled for tomorrow, which means that it is expected to be completed or submitted by the end of the day as per the agreed upon timeline and requirements. Or you could say, the project deadline is tomorrow. One of these is clear, simple, straight to the point. The other one, you get lost in the words. Number 4, use pauses. Pauses are very powerful, and they are the most underutilized tool. So be mindful. A good speaker uses a rate that is about 30% slower than conversational speech. Okay, so why are pauses so powerful? It calms the conversation down. It calms the speaker. It gives you time to compose yourself, and therefore you come across as thoughtful and deliberate. People take you more seriously when you come across as thoughtful and deliberate. It also gives the listener time to process what you're saying. You already know what you're saying, you've thought about it, but they don't. They are hearing it for the first time. So you need to give them time to process. And if you don't give them that, you are going to lose their engagement very easily. Pauses are also very important for humor. Comedy is all about timing, and pauses are what allow you to get that timing right. Okay, so pauses are powerful, but when should you pause? If you're doing a public speaking engagement, right, whether it's to a group of people in a conference room or big auditorium, make sure you pause before you enter the room. Make sure you pause before you start speaking. Make sure you pause after your last sentence, before you thank the audience. In addition, you should use grammar as your guide. Every comma and period is a natural place to pause. You also use pauses for emphasis. So pause before and after your main points. Okay, number 5, watch the fillers. I mean, you know, it's like when those are all fillers. They don't add anything. They actually distract from what you're trying to say. We all do it, right? But being mindful of them goes a long way. What could you do instead? You could use those pauses. You could slow down your rate of speech. Both of those are going to help minimize fillers. Sometimes it's okay to say, hold on, just give me a moment to get my thoughts together. It's okay to say that. It also tells the other person that you're really listening and you're engaged. So that's an added bonus. Preparation helps as well. So if it's a public speaking engagement, you've already prepared what you're going to say, and that's going to help cut down a lot on the fillers as well. Someone who uses fillers excessively comes across as very uncertain and unsure of what they're saying. They come across as lacking confidence. People are less likely to trust what that person says. People are more likely to think that that person is not competent. Number 6, last but not the least, don't interrupt. This one is obvious. It is very disrespectful when you interrupt someone. You're telling them that what they want to say, what they're trying to say, is not important. Here are some very interesting statistics. Stanford did a study that looked at same-sex conversations and conversations between men and women. In same-sex conversations, they didn't say how long the length of the conversation was, but regardless, In same-sex conversations, so men talking to men, women talking to women, there were around 10 interruptions. In a conversation that involved a man and a woman, are you ready for this? There were 48 interruptions, and 46 of those were initiated by men. Something to think about. Here's some other research. George Washington University did another study, and they found that men interrupt 33 times more when they're talking to women as compared to when they're talking to other men. So, whether you're a man or a woman, there's something to take away from this. Be mindful and don't interrupt. If you are being interrupted, please say something. Please stand up for yourself. Please don't let it just pass. All right, we covered a lot of information today. We defined communication, we talked about the costs of miscommunication, and we went over 6 facets of one component of our system, which is speaking. We talked about rate of speech, we talked about being precise, we talked about being concise, we talked about using pauses, we talked about watching the fillers, and we talked about interruptions. There's a lot to take in. I want to make sure that you take the time to watch this video. If you needed to watch it again to get all the bits and pieces, make sure you do that. But that's not going to be enough. Then you have to put in actual work. You have to spend some time analyzing and reflecting on your own speech pattern. I want you to pick one aspect that's particularly challenging for you and set a goal for yourself to do better in that one aspect. I want you to let me know in the comments how easy or hard it was for you. And I also want you to let me know how it changed the quality of your communication. Once you put that strategy into practice, once you were being mindful of using that strategy, how did it change the quality of your communications? I would love to hear from you, and I hope you learned something new and interesting in this video. So that is it for today's topic. Next week, we will be talking about Gear 2.
If you have any ideas about what Gear 2 or any of the other components of this system might be, please don't forget to let me know in the comments below. I look forward to hearing your ideas.
I am so glad you joined me today. I hope you learned something interesting. I hope you use the information to make a positive change in your speaking style. And I hope to see you again next week. Let's thrive together.